I'm going to choose a room that's about 250 square feet. In the middle of the new room, with the smell of fresh wood in the air, Lucas said with a joyful laugh. I stopped unpacking. Is she going for a room that's about 250 square feet? What in the world is Jessica talking about? I'm taking this corner room, Lucas announced, making me even more unable to grasp the situation. If you defy me, I won't be taking care of you, Lucas declared with a sneer, glaring at me. But inside, my mind was still in chaos. Huh? Whose house are we talking about? Feeling that something wasn't adding up with my eldest son and his wife, I questioned them. Huh? What? They both gave me a vacant look, and finally, I began to understand the situation. Ah, I see. That's what this is about. This could be a good opportunity to set things straight with my eldest son, Lucas, and his wife, Jessica, who have been running me ragged for years. I must not let this chance pass by. Alone, I felt a fiery determination inside me. My name is Catherine Thompson. I'm turning 65 this year. My husband passed away from pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. By the time the cancer was found, it was too late, and he passed away a few months later. The abruptness of it all left me unable to catch up emotionally, and for a while, I lived like a shell of a person, just eating, going to the bathroom, and bathing, simply passing the days. Lately, my legs have been getting worse, making it hard to live on my own. It was my eldest son, Lucas, who brought a ray of hope into my wilted life. That year, Lucas was getting married and he and his fiancée, Jessica, expressed a desire to live with me. I was taken aback when Lucas suddenly brought up cohabitation. Up to that point, he had been living in the company housing provided by the regional bank he worked for. I had simply assumed that they would naturally set up their own place once married. But contrary to my expectations, my son and his wife-to-be wanted to live with me. I hadn't even met Jessica yet, and I didn't know anything about her. But for me, having lost the love of my life and feeling a gaping hole in my heart, Lucas's offer to live together felt like a consolation sent from God. Of course, I'll contribute to the household expenses. Oh, I'm fine with it. I found myself quickly agreeing before I knew it, and Lucas smiled with satisfaction. Got it. Then I'll bring Jessica over next week. Take care, he said, and with those words, Lucas left. Despite his somewhat rough personality, I always thought that was just because he was in front of his parents, maybe showing some rebellion. To me, he was still my dear child. I felt as if my once lonely life had suddenly been illuminated. A week later, as promised, eldest son couple came to our house. Here we are. Despite it being our first meeting, I was surprised by how Jessica confidently strode in, her footsteps echoing loudly. Despite being the same age as Lucas, 30 years old, she wore a skirt shorter than knee length, her hair was dyed pink. And her nails were glittery and flamboyant. Nice to meet you. You're Jessica, right? Yeah, that's me. But, what's with this house? It's kinda run down and small, isn't it? I was taken aback as Jessica entered the house and immediately started criticizing it without even a proper greeting. That's true. But it's better than nothing, so bear with it. Sure. Lucas retorted with a dismissive tone, which confused me even more since just a week ago he had been so keen on moving in. Despite the sudden rudeness, I reminded myself that we were going to be living together from now on, and I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. So, I sat Lucas and Jessica down and served them some tea. Do you work, Jessica? There's no way I'm working, it's just too much hassle. Oh, I see. And what about you, do you work? No, I've been a homemaker. Wow, so you're living off your husband's pension? Must be nice. You can just live it up without working a day. Despite both of us being homemakers, I looked at Jessica in disbelief as she sarcastically laughed and called my situation quite the nice position. I do receive a survivor's pension, but that's my only income. It's nowhere near enough for a luxurious life, I'm just getting by day to day. Living leisurely is nothing but a pipe dream. More importantly, Jessica, how should we divide the household chores? Since we're both homemakers, maybe we can split them equally? Wanting to change the subject, I proposed this to Jessica. Living together means the three of us supporting and helping each other out in our daily lives. I assumed that since Lucas would be working during the day and contributing financially, Jessica would be willing to help with the chores. However, she frowned visibly at my suggestion. Divide the chores? No way, you should handle all that. I don't know anything about this house. Plus, I'm busy hanging out with friends. With that sharp retort, Jessica looked at me with a piercing gaze as if dumping all the responsibilities on me. Well, then, just help out whenever you can, please. I couldn't ask too much of Jessica since we had just met today, so I ended up conceding on the issue of chores. Jessica wore a smirk as if she had one. I felt overwhelmed and dismayed thinking about our future life together. Living with 3 other people was a far cry from the married life I had initially imagined. First off, Lucas would say he's too busy with work and wouldn't come home until late at night. True to her initial declaration, Jessica didn't do any household chores. I thought she might at least be able to take out the trash, but she seemed to have trouble getting up in the morning and couldn't manage to do it on time. Reluctantly, I found myself doing all the housework for 3. Before moving in together, I thought this would fill the void of missing my husband, but now I regretted it, thinking maybe I was better off alone. Jessica wasn't just neglecting the household chores, she was out and about every day. Given her flashy appearance, I had suspected she might be a bit wild, but to be out playing every day really was quite the nice position indeed. Every time Jessica came home, she was always carrying shopping bags from well-known international brands. These were brands that sold luxury items I could never afford on my pension. When I asked, "How did you afford these?" she laughed through her nose and said, "Obviously, I bought them with my allowance." However, I knew Lucas's salary wasn't high enough to afford multiple high-end brand items. If Jessica had been saving up her allowance bit by bit to buy these things, I could understand, but buying brand-name items nearly every day doesn't leave room to save. I wondered where she could possibly be getting so much money. And there was another unexpected issue for me. Lucas wasn't contributing financially to the household. About a month after we started living together, I thought Lucas would have transferred some of his salary into our household account by now, so I checked at the bank. But there was no money from Lucas. Before we started living together, I remembered Lucas saying, "I'll contribute financially to the household." Well, it's only been a month, maybe he's just late or forgot. I thought and went home without much suspicion that day. However, as 2 months, then 3 months passed, there was still no financial contribution from Lucas. I finally decided to tell him that it was impossible to cover the living expenses for 3 people with just my pension. Could you contribute a little to the household? The budget for groceries is really tight. Sorry, I forgot. I'll make sure to put in some next time. Hearing the words "I forgot," I felt relieved and believed that Lucas would start contributing financially from next month. However, his promise seemed to be just an excuse to placate a child, and he never actually made the transfer. I pleaded with Lucas several times, but he was usually drunk by the time he got home and quickly forgot what I had said. Or perhaps he was pretending to forget. When it became clear that I wouldn't receive any money from Lucas, I had no choice but to find a part-time job. I started working at a local flower shop. Returning to work after so long was exciting, but the long hours were tough on my body, which was already past retirement age. Still, the pressure of earning enough to support 3 people weighed heavily on me. I worked 6 to 8 hours during the day, similar to a full-time job, then came home to prepare dinner for 3. Jessica, as usual, did not start helping with the chores even though I had begun working. On the contrary, she would throw tantrums over the meals I cooked, like a small child. One evening, she flipped her plate over and exclaimed, "What is this? It tastes awful. I wanted curry. Make it again." It wasn't just one day that such incidents occurred. Again and again, Jessica would find fault with the meals I prepared based on her mood for the day. I felt a surge of anger and sadness, but realized that arguing with the unreasonable Jessica was futile, so I silently remade the meal. I wanted to break free from this life that felt like slavery. I can't go on like this. Instinctively, I knew I couldn't go on like this. So, I decided to find a hobby to distract myself and asked the manager of the flower shop, "Can you think of any hobbies I could do at home?" The manager, Mrs. Smith, was a young woman in her 40s who you could tell must have been very beautiful in her 20s, fitting the image of a florist perfectly. "How about something handmade? You're welcome to use the flowers that we're going to discard." Following the manager's advice, I decided to make jewelry using flowers. Making jewelry was a lot of fun. I was naturally skilled with my hands and quickly got the hang of making jewelry that looked just as good as what you'd find in a store. The manager, who was knowledgeable, even showed me a site where I could sell my handmade creations. Just out of curiosity, I put the jewelry I made up for sale on a website. Just out of curiosity, I posted some of my jewelry on the selling site, and within a week, orders started coming in, and I began to earn an income from it. The joy of earning money from a hobby was exhilarating, and I made jewelry in every spare moment I had. Jessica scoffed at my efforts, saying, "What's this? People actually buy these?" But I ignored her. When she realized I wasn't paying attention to her, she tried to annoy me by saying, "You're just like a burden to society, an old person who's useless." But I didn't react to that either. No matter what Jessica said, I wasn't afraid anymore. 5 years had passed since I started making jewelry, and I turned 65. Recently, I bought a house nearby. I loved the house I was living in because of the memories with my husband, but it was getting old, and everything was starting to fall apart. So I was satisfied to be able to buy a new house. And as I was thinking about living there without my eldest son couple, Jessica peeked over my shoulder at the floor plan of my new home. "Wow, is this a new house? What's this, are you moving?" Jessica exclaimed with a cheerfulness I had never heard from her before. Looking at floor plans is indeed fun, and I like it too, but I never imagined that Jessica, who always seemed so angry, would get this excited. "Yes, that's right. Wow, it's really big." Jessica was absorbed in the floor plan, forgetting herself. For the first time in 5 years of living together, I saw a childlike side to Jessica. After that, I was busy buying furniture for the new house and packing up for the move. Lucas and Jessica, as usual, did whatever they pleased, paying no mind to my busyness. On the day of the move, I had asked some acquaintances to help with the big items, so I left the house with just one suitcase. "The new house is big, isn't it?" "It's spacious, I've seen the layout." The eldest son couple seemed eager to see the new house, and they were more excited than usual. I took Lucas and Jessica to the new home. Upon seeing the stylish black exterior, wooden door, and the large garden, both of them exclaimed, "Wow!" The garden was my own personal touch, something I insisted on for my hobby of growing flowers. When we entered, the expansive rooms spread out before us, and I felt very satisfied. Having bad knees, I made sure the house was single-story and had handrails installed, which turned out to be the right decision. "Whoa! It's super spacious and super clean." "It's more than I expected." The two of them, eyes sparkling as if they owned the place, walked around the house while I was unpacking, cheering every now and then. That's when I began to feel a sense of unease, thinking, After they had looked through all the rooms, they came back to where I was. "I'm going to choose a room that's about 250 square feet." In the middle of the new room, with the smell of fresh wood in the air, Jessica said with a joyful laugh. I stopped unpacking. "Is she going for a room that's about 250 square feet? What in the world is Jessica talking about?" "I'm taking this corner room," Lucas announced, making me even more unable to grasp the situation. "If you defy me, I won't be taking care of you," Lucas declared with a sneer, glaring at me. But inside, my mind was still in chaos. "Whose house are we talking about?" Feeling that something wasn't adding up with my eldest son and his wife, I questioned them. Huh? What? They both gave me a vacant look, and finally, I began to understand the situation. Ah, I see. That's what this is about. This could be a good opportunity to set things straight with my eldest son, Lucas, and his wife, Jessica, who have been running me ragged for years. I must not let this chance pass by. Alone, I felt a fiery determination inside me. I bought this house for myself. I explained the reasons for buying the house to my eldest son and his wife, who were standing there in front of me. I told them about the original house deteriorating with age, my thoughts on wanting to end our cohabitation, and how I considered that it might be more comfortable for Lucas and Jessica to live on their own without me.
Ending the cohabitation? What are you talking about? Yes. I haven't heard anything about this. I thought we were going to live in this house.
The two were bewildered by my confession. From my perspective, I couldn't comprehend the nerve of eldest son couple, who seemed intent on living with me indefinitely. Moreover, I never said a single word about us living together in this new house. If we were going to live together, I surely would have consulted them about the floor plan to some extent. I hadn't discussed anything about the house with my eldest son couple, so the fact that they assumed they would be living here too was a real surprise.
I'm sorry if it wasn't clear, but I thought if I explained it in detail, you might insist on coming along. And since I was only packing my things, I thought you would have realized. Even today, I assumed you were just coming to see my new place. After all, Jessica, you dislike everything about my cooking and cleaning, don't you? I never thought that you would actually want to continue living with me.
When I said that, heavy with irony, Jessica was at a loss for words, uttering only a stifled
But that's weird. How come you have the money to buy such a house? I've looked through the household account as much as I could and never saw that kind of money. Never mind.
Lucas's face turned pale as if he had let something slip by accident. I was aware that Lucas had been taking money from the household funds. I had stayed silent because I was waiting to see when Lucas would reflect on his actions. If he had shown even the slightest hint of remorse, I might have consulted him about the new house. But Lucas hadn't just failed to contribute financially to the house, he had been using the household money for himself, so I had resolved not to hold back anymore.
I earned the money myself. It was about 5 years ago, I think. I started making jewelry as a hobby, remember? The florist manager suggested it to me. Initially, I was just selling a little bit on a sales website, but then a famous influencer featured my jewelry on their social media. After that, my creations started selling like crazy, and my income increased significantly.
Yes. The reason I, who was living on a pension, could afford a house was because of my success in selling jewelry. Of course, even with the buzz, jewelry sales alone wouldn't have made enough money to buy a house. I received invitations from various apparel and jewelry companies, participated in tie-up projects, and got advertisements. I wanted to use the substantial amount of money I earned, which I couldn't have achieved with just my part-time job, to buy a new house because of the strained living situation with my eldest son couple.
It's a lie! There's no way you can earn money like that!
Jessica screamed in denial of the reality. Up to this year, when she turned 35, Jessica had hardly ever worked. Yet she was always splurging on luxury brands, indulging in extravagance. It was no surprise that someone like her couldn't understand how to earn money.
I know about you, Jessica. I heard you dropped out of high school, had a fight with your parents, and ran away from home. You were homeless, lied about your age to work nights, right? I can sympathize with that, even if it wasn't the right thing to do. But after quitting that job, just wandering around aimlessly, hanging out with bad influences, splurging on luxury items, and then it even led to shoplifting, didn't it? No!
Jessica's face showed shock, clearly not expecting me to confront her about shoplifting. I had suspected Jessica of shoplifting about a year after we started living together. I always thought it was strange that she was wearing only luxury items right from the start. There's no way Lucas's salary could cover the cost of such high-end brands. I immediately suspected shoplifting. One afternoon, when Jessica went out, I discreetly followed her and, sure enough, she was guilty. I could have confronted her right there and then, but knowing Jessica, she would have likely talked her way out of it. So, I decided to record evidence of her shoplifting on my phone, thinking that if she didn't change her ways, I would turn it over to the police someday. I have proof. Look, I said, showing her the video. Jessica's face tensed even more upon seeing it. With the evidence before her, she couldn't say anything in return and just hung her head low. And Lucas, stealing money from the bank where you work, that's just the lowest of the low. You must have been in debt, right?
How did you know that, Mom?
Now it was Lucas who started to tremble. To them, I must have seemed like a police officer about to question them about the crimes they had committed. You see, the daughter of my florist's manager just started working as a new graduate at the same company as you this year, in the same department, no less. She told me that she saw you pocketing the money that customers entrusted to the bank. Being new and worried about making a false accusation against a senior, she hasn't spoken up about it to anyone. But I've thought to myself, if anyone at that bank would steal their own company's money, it would be you. This is what I heard, so there's no evidence, but given that Lucas was giving Jessica a substantial allowance every month, never contributing any money to the house, and actually stealing from the household funds, it seemed likely to be true.
That's Smith. I educated her thoroughly, yet she's so ungrateful.
Lucas fumed, shaking with anger at the manager's daughter's betrayal. Hearing Lucas's words, I took it as an admission of his theft and seized the moment to lash out. You educated her? You probably thought you were the most important person in this house, didn't you? Acting all high and mighty at work too, looking down on everyone else. But too bad. That won't work with me. This house is a prime example. I earned the money and bought this house with my own effort. You're not the great one here. Of course, I'm not saying I am either, but at least I won't let a house that I bought with money I worked hard for be taken away by you too. Now, please leave immediately. My scream sent Lucas and Jessica fleeing from the house in terror. I breathed a sigh of relief. From tomorrow, I would no longer have to see those two. Just the thought made my heart feel lighter. Later, I reported Lucas and Jessica's crimes to the police. The police immediately looked into it. And frankly, there wasn't much to investigate. The evidence of Jessica's shoplifting and Lucas's theft was clear as day on the security cameras. They were taken away by the police without any fuss, and seeing my child and his wife being led away, I felt no stir of emotion. I could only think they had to fend for themselves now. Initially, I was pleased with my son and his wife's intentions to comfort me when we started living together, but as I lived with these two who did as they pleased, my stress accumulated. In retrospect, it's clear that when they brought up living with me, their true goal was to have me do all the housework while they lived comfortably. Saying goodbye to a life of being insulted and having money taken by Lucas and Jessica, I now feel refreshed. Even if they are released by the police, they'll be too busy paying off their debts. I'm certain their marriage will fall apart, given they can barely manage household chores. But I am resolute in my decision not to help them ever again. I've vowed to lead a life free from any ties to my eldest son and his wife. While continuing my part-time job at the flower shop, I've been putting even more effort into making jewelry. When I revealed that the flowers used in my jewelry came from the flower shop where I work, an unprecedented number of customers started to visit. Responding to customers' requests to use flowers as parts for their jewelry, I also began selling flowers specifically for this purpose. Manager showed concern, saying, "If your jewelry business is that successful, you could just focus on that," but I shook my head. After all, it was a hobby recommended to me by Manager Smith. I believe if using flowers from the florist in my jewelry helps the shop flourish, then that's the best outcome. I plan to continue walking this new path in life, enriched by both my work and my hobby.